It says I'm live. Let's hope that I am, because my computer decided to flip out on me completely like 3 minutes before I was ready to do this thing. So here's hoping that this is working. I'll give it a minute. Hi, everybody. I hope everybody is well and happy and not too stressed. It feels like the world's falling apart sometimes, but that's not what we're going to be here to talk about. We're just going to give it a minute. This was kind of an impromptu stream and kind of needed a break from the show I've been streaming for about 2 weeks now. So I decided it's about time I carried through with that reviewing things in a live stream threat that I've been saying I would do for like 2 years, ever since my computer decided it wasn't good enough for video editors anymore, even the cheapest free ones. So, alrighty. We'll just give it another minute. I'm going to take a peek at my notes. So everybody gets to actually see me looking at my notes instead of me editing it all out for a change and a half, right? Oh, wait, no, I was horrible at editing that out already. Whoopsies. Oh, supposedly one person is watching. That's cool. All right, well, tonight I finally want to discuss a movie I did a review of over a year ago before I moved to this house, before my editor decided to crash. I had everything filmed, I had all my pictures set up, I had the layout, I had the music, all my clips were done. I just needed to edit it all together, and then all of a sudden crash, burn, fire, horrible, anarchy. And I was never able to retrieve it or put it together sensibly again because my computer's a piece of shit, as we have established many, many times before. And I never really got to fully talk about it. So I know I've mentioned it in other streams. I've probably ranted and raved about it, but I've never just sat down and done a review of it with you guys. So that's what I figured I would try and do here today. All right, so are we ready? I think we're ready. Tonight we're going to talk about 1978's Magic, which was directed by Richard Attenborough. Most people in my generation know him as John Hammond from Jurassic Park. But he had a very prolific, very prolific career. He directed a lot of movies, including Shadowlands, which is another Anthony Hopkins movie, because Anthony Hopkins was in Magic, that I love. It's kind of a drama romance compared to this one, which is kind of like a horror love story. What else did he direct? He also directed A Chorus Line, the very bad adaptation of the Broadway musical. And he also directed Chaplin, which I believe also starred Anthony Hopkins. Those two worked a bit together. So I don't know if most people would say he was a talented director, but he did very good in this particular movie. The script, well, I don't know if it was the script, but William Goldman was given credit for the writing. I think it says short and story, so he must have written the book and maybe a first draft or something like that of the script of the movie. William Goldman, he wrote The Princess Bride screenplay, Dreamcatcher, Hearts in Atlantis, The General's Daughter. He's done a lot of screenplays or the books that were made into screenplays. And a lot of these are near and dear to my heart. Sometimes I look at the credits for Magic and I'm like, this is my childhood. Like, a lot of these things are bits and pieces of my childhood all over the place that were scattered to the winds and all collected together in this one place. So those were a couple of the creators. The music was written by Jerry Goldsmith, who I freaking love. What was interesting, though, I was trying to look him up to make sure I wasn't getting him mixed up with other people, because that kind of crap happens in life. And I saw a lot of credits that he was given for being the conductor, like a lot of scores for Disney films. But I'm like, but it doesn't say he actually composed them. It says he conducted them, because he was a very well-known composer, conductor, not just a composer. So that was confusing to me. I had to go to Wikipedia and try and differentiate between all these. So again, the story of my life, the score of my life, because not only did he write the score for Magic, he wrote the score for Alien, The Omen, Chinatown, Poltergeist, lots of other things. But oh my god, I love this. I've never seen Chinatown actually, but I knew a lot. I wrote that one down because I know that's like a really famous one that got him or nearly got him awards and stuff. So figured I'd had it. Don't mind me, I'm being nosy about if there are people there. You know me, I love to see if people are watching. It's better to know somebody's watching than to say I'm orating to myself. So those are the people behind the camera and behind the scenes. But this movie stars Anthony Hopkins. We all know Anthony Hopkins. He plays Corgi Whitfield, Corgi and Fats, but Corgi Whitfield? I knew I should have. Whitaker? I knew I should have written down his last name. He's only credited as Corky and Fats in the credits. He's not given his full name in the credits on IMDb. But I did hear it. I heard it in the movie. I just forgot to write it down. It also has Anne Margaret as Peggy Ann. Burgess Meredith. Now, I do know Burgess Meredith. Burgess Meredith I know is in Rocky, although I've never seen Rocky all the way through to my knowledge. And I personally know him as the ancient elf from the Santa Claus movie, or Santa Claus, the movie, in the 1980s. So, yeah, it made an indelible impression on me in that role. We've got Ed Lauter. Burgess Meredith played Corky's talent agent, Ben Green. Ed Lautner played Duke. E.J. Andre played Merlin, who is a little role in the beginning. And there's a little cameo, which is bigger than Merlin's role, but still small, by David Ogden Stiers, who I really love because, he did a lot of voices for Disney. He's been in tons of movies. I remember him in the North and South series, which had been the youngest I'd ever seen him in the North and South movie TV series until I saw Magic. So I got to see him like really young and with actual hair, and sometimes that's how I feel about Anthony Hopkins. Like, hey, you can see hair color. What a change. Now, obviously, I've seen him in a lot of him in way more. So I've seen him with hair color before and since Magic, but not too often. So yeah, it's got a great cast. I don't know if you could call it entirely all-star. I didn't even look up what else Anne Margaret was in because I didn't personally recognize her. I probably should, though. So, Magic is, guys, I probably should have grabbed a drink before I sat down, but I forgot to grab myself a drink. And I'm probably talking really fast because I'm starting the stream kind of late at night for me, and I had a cup of coffee. So, oops. So, here's relax my other notes. So let's go over the synopsis, the summary for Magic, shall we? Magic is about Corky, who is a magician, ventriloquist. Anthony Hopkins learned ventriloquy and a lot of magic tricks for this role. Fats, his dummy, was created to look specifically like Anthony Hopkins once he was given the role. I heard Gene Wilder was going to be offered the role first, but one of the producers said they didn't want a comedian in the role because of how serious it was. And apparently Gene Wilder thought it would have been better if he'd been in it. But from what I understand, Gene Wilder might have been a really major egotistical ass based on the impressions I've been getting from him since this past couple of years. I don't know if that's true. I don't know if I'm just picking up on the really negative aspects of the here and there, but the times I've heard him in interviews or things he's said about roles lately, just meh. But he didn't get the role. Sir Tony, like the best actor on the frickin' planet, got the role, thank God. And so he plays Corky. He has a dummy named Fats, but in the very beginning of the movie, we see him returning to an apartment where this old man named Merlin lays. He seems to be really sick, and Corky has just had his premiere performance at a bar, a little nightclub. And he's trying to tell Merlin how fantastic it was and how blown away the audience was. And Merlin's just like, kid, don't shit a shitter. And then we see the actuality. Well, we're seeing the actuality of what happened this whole time. But then, the sound starts coming and everything. And we see that Corky got really distracted by the fact that nobody was paying a damn bit of attention. Nobody gave a shit about what he was doing on the stage. People were ignoring him. There was this really obnoxiously loud laughing woman over at one table. Like, just, she must have been louder than every other person in the place just with her laugh. And I guess he lost his shit and started screaming at the audience because they weren't paying attention. So it's very clear he has some real major anxiety issues from the very beginning. But after that scene, when Merlin's basically like, "Hey, you'll do better," we cut into the future and we see Burgess Meredith. Ah, I can't talk straight today, guys. Burgess Meredith's character. What did I say his full name was again? Ben Green, sitting down at the same club, packed club this time, because it was like maybe half full the first time Corky was there, but this time it's completely packed to the walls, and he's sitting there with somebody working in television, played by David Ogden Stiers. His character's name is George Todson. Hey, I remembered his first name. Again, it didn't say George Todson on the IMDb credits. And Corky has a new thing to his act, which is basically a rated X ventriloquist dummy who starts out sitting in the smoky, darkened room, shouting smack to him and talking down and talking how he's going to fuck up his tricks and how he does his tricks and stuff. And, he's just a foul-mouthed little dummy. Apparently, R.L. Stine, when he wrote Night of the Living Dummy, was inspired by the Fats dummy in this film, and I could definitely tell that. And the story magic also inspired a character from American Horror Story Freak Show that Neil Patrick Harris's character plays, except in that, never mind, I won't get into American Horror Story in the comparison. It's just, as soon as I saw the show, I knew exactly what it was referencing. There are even scenes that are directly ripped from Magic. One scene in very specific, particular. Blah, blah, blah. I make sense tonight. It's the coffee, I'm telling you. So audience freaking loves him. He Corky talks to Todson and Green in back, and it's really funny because Corky does a lot of talking with Fats on his lap, and Fats does a lot of smack talking, and he calls Ben Gangrene instead of just Green or Ben. And they assume that he might get signed up for a network special of some kind, or just a TV spot to get him a little bit more famous because he's an up-and-coming star, and he's already been on TV a little. Ben says, "Look, I'm going to sign you up for a couple of Las Vegas lounges, maybe a few TV guest spots, try and get you used to this type of audience. And when we're all set, if this really starts coming to fruition, I'll take you out to lunch at the Four Seasons in New York City." And that's the very next scene we go to, which is them sitting down and saying, "Guess what? NBC wants you." Wait, was it NBC? I wrote it down. I want to make sure I have this right, because they dropped a real, actual, yeah, NBC. It's NBC. They also name dropped Steve Martin. So I guess I know Steve Martin did have his own show back in the 70s, didn't he? I think he did. And I think that's why he's name dropped. So they're having lunch, and Ben's like, "Look, it's practically in the bag, but there are some things that have to be done, like figuring out who has to pay for what, who's going to do what, how much is going to be allowed, and you have to go get this physical. It's a company policy, it's a network policy." And Corky immediately shuts that thought down. He's like, "I'm not taking a physical." And Ben's like, "Well, what's wrong? Are you sick?" He's like, "No, I'm not sick, but it's principle. I'm just not taking a physical." And Ben does what he can to get Corky out of this, but he calls and he says, "Look, let me come over and talk to you. We'll get over you need to calm down. You're anxious. It's just nerves. You're going to be fine." But I couldn't get them to budge on the physical. You have to take it. And Corky's just like, "No, no, I'm not going to be here." And he hangs up on Ben and he takes off and he throws Fats into a luggage case, grabs some clothes and takes off, and he ends up in a cab in his old hometown. And you see like him passing a certain house, and it looks like little flashbacks of little baby kind of Corky, sitting on the front steps with his mom and stuff on the porch. You get the idea that it probably wasn't the best childhood. He was probably pretty poor. But I mean, I didn't get a distinct impression just by watching it. Oh, this is him seeing a past version of himself. This could have just been looking at his old house and seeing a new kid there. But apparently that's what was supposed to be. Research says so. So he goes to a resort, like a campground with cabins that is closed for the season, but he talks the woman there into letting him stay for a while. And it turns out that this was his high school crush, and you see them each in separate rooms once he's checked in, going like, "Oh, they didn't remember me." So they both remember each other and they didn't acknowledge it. But in the next scene where he goes to ask her for some soap, because of course it was out of season, the cabins weren't prepared for guests. There was no soap in the cabin for him. And they reunite, and she gets to play with the dummy, and the dummy's talking dirty, and it's all fun and games. And after that, they talk together, they have wine, they go for walks, they're skipping rocks, and they're talking about magic tricks. And he's like, "I don't do magic. I do tricks. Tricks take skill. Magic isn't real." And she's like, "Oh, I don't believe that. I believe magic is real." They start talking about ESP. And he says he'd like to believe in ESP because his mentor Merlin and Merlin's wife got so close after so many years of marriage that it was like they could read each other's minds, except they wanted to make it like real and they would practice it. And she's like, well, can you show me? Because she's so into actual magic, or as she sees magic, she's got a very childlike excitement for the concept. And he's very like, no, I don't want to do that, because what if I screw up and fail or whatever? Don't pressure me. I came here to get away from the pressure. She's like, "I'm not trying to pressure you. Just forget about it." But next scene we see they've got two decks of cards, and they're trying to do this "look at the card and I'll tell you what it is" thing. And he keeps not getting it. He's getting more and more agitated, and he's sweating, and he's starting to scream at her for not thinking hard enough, and he's getting so anxious and pacing, and she's scared. You can see she's actually kind of scared of him but she's also so worried about him because she can see how damaged he is in his fear of failure, which is what set him off in the first place to take off, obviously. And finally, I get the impression, because she never shows him her card in the end, but she finally just says, "You got it. You got it." And he just kind of collapses, and he's like, "I didn't fail. I didn't fail. I didn't fail." And she hugs him, and this leads to a making love scene. Never thought I'd see Anthony Hopkins in a sex scene, but there you go. Very tastefully done, thank God. Wonderful scene, gorgeous violin score, Jerry Goldsmith, but it's intercut with this harmonica piece where it keeps cutting to Fats the dummy sitting in a chair against the wall, and it looks like he's watching them make love. Like he's in the cabin, he's in Corky's cabin, but it's intercut and looks like he's watching them. And that's one of the scenes that was stolen from American Horror Story, although it was portrayed differently in that. The dummy was actually sitting there watching them, and that they made it spooky in another way. And after that, they talk about the fact that, hey, she's married. She has a husband that she's been married to since high school. Corky knows him. It hasn't been a great marriage. She's married, and Corky wants her to run away with him. But she says, "Let me think about it." He goes back to his cabin, and he starts having a confrontation with Fats, because every scene you see him alone, he's talking to Fats, and Fats is talking back to him. And they try to make it unclear and ambiguous as to whether Fats is a real thing, like a possessed doll or another weirdly deformed human, or God knows what could be happening, that have been used in so many dummy horror stories ever since this movie came out, maybe even before that. But they get in this really heated argument because Fats is jealous that Corky's spending this time with Peg and wants to go out with her and travel the world without him and stuff. And all of a sudden, Ben is there. Ben Greenlee Gangrene, who is called the postman because he always delivers, has found out where he ran to and come to find him, and he walked in on Corky having a verbal argument with his ventriloquist. And this has got to lead to the most intense 8 minutes in movie history for me. I mean, because Ben is like, this is why you didn't want to take the physical. You didn't want people to know that you had some mental problems. We've got to get you help. If we can get you help, we can fix this. And Corky's like, no, I don't need a doctor. I don't need help. I'm fine. And he says, I'll tell you what. If you can do one thing for me, we'll drop it. We'll pretend this never happened and we'll go on. But if you can't do it, you gotta let me get you some help. And he says, I want you to make Fats shut up for 5 minutes. Sorry, guys, I'm fiddling and throwing things everywhere. So Corky's like, 5 minutes? Okay, 5 minutes. I could make him shut up for 5 years, no problem. And he puts him down, he sits down, and it's very long, mostly quiet. And he's like, so can we talk, or is this supposed to be completely silent? Am I just supposed to shut him up? And Ben's not really responding. He's like, oh, okay, I guess we gotta be silent. And like every 20 or 30 seconds, he's like, how much time is it? How much time is it? He makes it about 2.5 minutes. And he's like, Ben, I can't do it. And Ben's like, yeah, kid, I know. I didn't think you could. And, after a couple more seconds, Corky just grabs the doll and he just goes on this riff that lasts like a solid minute of just verbal diarrhea from this puppet. And Ben gets up to go, and Corky keeps grabbing him and is begging him not to go or do this to him. And, he's like, look, I'm not taking away your one chance. I was your one chance, and you need help. And he goes to leave. Again, Corky starts fighting with Fats, and he's like, you gotta stop the postman. And he's like, how? And he's like, stop the postman. How? Stop the postman. And he's like, with what? And Corky and Fats just says, me. And the next thing we see is Fats apparently attacking Ben, bludgeoning Ben to death with his head, and actually cracking part of his wooden head a bit, I think, because after that we see Corky has patched it up and put the wig back on him. I'm losing track. Sorry, guys. I mean, I just watched it like an hour and a half ago. So much stuff is happening. I'm just kind of blue. I'm past that part. That's why I got lost. I finished the end of my notes on that page. Yeah, after he's done bludgeoning Ben, we see them with Corky patching up Fats, and Fats is like, why don't you fill his pockets with rocks and you doggy paddle out into the middle of the lake and let him sink. So Corky goes to do that, and turns out Ben wasn't dead, and he comes to, and there's a fight in the water, and it looks like, and they both go under, and you don't see them come back up again. It just cuts to the next morning when Corky is being called to from Peg outside, and she's like, look, Duke came home last night late. He didn't want me being here alone with a man. And there's this whole group of scenes where Corky's being funny, like, hey, does he have a telescope? Because if he doesn't, I just want to tell you this, because Peg is standing a good distance away. He's like, like, hey, I want to tell you that your breasts are so beautiful, they should be in the Louvre. Oh, and I like coffee. I'd like to have a coffee, and I want you to run away from me, and run away with me. I mean, and And of course, he goes to have breakfast with the couple, and he reunites with Duke, and they talk. And then there's a scene between Duke and Peg where he's drinking and he is accusing Peg of fucking Corky. And she says, no, I didn't sleep with him, but I wanted to. And then it cuts to Duke confronting Corky and taking him out on the lake fishing. And I believe Corky also says, look, I didn't sleep with her. She loves you. She's crazy about you. And they end up finding Ben. They'd already actually, I missed something. I'm sorry, guys. I'll backtrack slightly. Right before the argument Duke had with Peg, between the Corky meeting Duke and Duke arguing with Peg, Duke was out for a walk and found Ben's Rolls Royce in the mud down the road. And there's a whole fake conversation on the phone Corky's having with Ben and other thing, and receptionist at his agent's office and stuff. So he's trying to pretend like he had no idea Ben had been there, and that's what led to the fight with Duke and Peg, him saying, hey, look, his story doesn't make any freaking sense. I don't believe it. And if he came up here and rang the doorbell looking for you guys, how is it you just happened to not be here? Were you fucking him when the doorbell rang? Blah, blah, blah. And this stuff like gets intense and physical. It's scary. It's scary. It's very domestic violence-y. But 70s, I guess, it was considered more acceptable. So, one fight, another confrontation, not so much fight. They find Ben's body is washed up on the shore. And for some reason, I can't remember if Ben was still alive. I don't think so. But they go back to the shore to get some help. The actual shore where their cabins are. I feel like I'm making no sense. This is why I started earlier than I was going to. And let's see, this part, for some reason, this part's always fuzzy to me, and I don't know why. There's nothing wrong with this part of the movie. It just always gets fuzzy for me. I believe that for whatever reason, maybe because he's already suspicious of Corky's story about Ben getting stuck in the mud after coming out to look for him, he goes to look in Corky's cabin and he finds Ben's ID. And next thing we know, he's getting stabbed to death by just a hand, getting stabbed to death. And we know Corky and Fats have killed him and they got rid of his body. Peg comes back and Corky begs her to leave with him. And she says, well, I will leave with you, but I have to leave Duke his pride, and I'm going to stay and tell him in person that I'm leaving. This leads to Fats acting up in Corky's arms and saying some things that really, really, really hurt Peg's feeling about, hey, that card trick he pulled, that's one he always uses to sleep with all the pretty stewardesses and stuff like that. I mean, just really painful stuff that make it seem like what they were sharing the couple of days beforehand seemed meaningless. And she takes off. And whew, wow, there are multiple confrontations in the movie between Fats and Corky, as I've already said. And one of the more heartbreaking scenes, I mean, there are 3 truly heartbreaking scenes in this movie. One was the cards scene where they're trying to do the ESP exercise and he's so scared of failing. There's the 5-minute shut up Fats scene. And there's the upcoming one, which is a big chunk of scene, 2 scenes where Peg is in her room with the door shut and Fats starts talking to her. Oh, I almost forgot. After she takes off, there's this scene between Corky and Fats where I don't even remember how it got started, but they were arguing and about how, oh, well, she was going to find out you were nuts anyways, and you this and you that. And Fats starts giving Corky commands like crawl around on the floor, ground like a dog, frown, smile, jump up and touch the ceiling, and then he tells him to get a knife. And he's like, no, I won't let you kill Peg. And he's like, oh, no, I don't have to. I'm going to let you do that. And after a little bit more discussion about that, intense, pained discussion about that, that's when we get to Peg in her room talking to Fats through the door, and Corky, as Fats, passes a little, like, heart that he made for her. I think it's one he whittled for her? I can't remember how he made it. I can't remember what the material is. I think he whittled it out of wood for her. He passes it under the door and he says, "Look, if you change your mind about us, give us a call." And the next thing you know, Corky is coming into the cabin and he says, "I couldn't do it." He tells Corky, "I couldn't do it. She liked our hurt though." And then you find out that he stabbed himself in order to keep himself from hurting Peg. And he lies down with Corky on the bed and they talk. And he says, and they end up talking about how they're both the same person. He's like, "You're not going to die before me. We're going to die together because it's always been us. I've always been you." And Corky dies on the bed. Him and Fats both dressed in the same outfit with his doll in his arms. And the last thing we see is, sorry, Vinny's being noisy. Last thing we see is Peg outside telling Corky, "Look, I changed my mind and you better game out here and don't play hard to get because you're not going to get a..." She uses her own really bad ventriloquist's voice. And she says, "You're not going to get an opportunity like this again." And as she's throwing a rock heart or whatever up into the air to catch it, that's when the movie ends. And it is so heartbreaking. I mean, a lot of people remember Magic as a killer doll movie, and it couldn't be further from the truth. And there have been so many TV episodes and movies and books that have taken a page from Magic and turned it into a killer doll story. So that's all that's known of it now. But it's really, really about just a really lonely, antisocial man who has such high anxiety that he basically has a form of dissociative identity disorder or schizophrenia. I believe the confirmed theory is dissociative identity disorder. Granted, this movie came out in the 70s. It doesn't do a lot of favors for people with different mental illness, but it still can shine a really bright spotlight on it. Like, people are scared of what will happen to them if they get help. People are scared of how they will be perceived if they are judged as mentally ill. And that's why he goes to the extremes he does, because he's scared to death of what's going to happen, and he is scared to death of failure and getting it wrong. And all he wanted was to have this woman love him. And even his own brain wouldn't let him have that. And it's just heartbreaking. The music is amazing. A lot of things having to do with Corky and his intimidation. Not Corky, but Fats. It's the score is made with a mouth organ, a harmonica. And in the scene where Anthony Hopkins is making, where Corky is making love to Joy, it cuts from these sweeping violins to the mouth organ and then back again, and they interweave. And there's a lot of that going on in the movie, and it just tells the story so beautifully. And Jerry Goldsmith and Richard Attenborough and the editors and the producers, they knew when to cut the music and let the story just speak for itself. And they knew when to keep it subtle, and they knew when to come in sweeping and sounding like heaven falling from the skies. And the performances are just so heart-wrenching. I mean, Corky needed help and he should have gotten help. But the only person that's, well, no, I mean, I can't say the only person who's really at fault here, but the only person who's really bad in this seems to be Duke. And honestly, I think that was just to fill out the runtime. I mean, it's kind of such a cliche. Oh, I want to go and fuck you and be with you, but I'm kind of already married, so they have to make the husband somebody worth leaving. Because otherwise, why would she be interested? She can't just be a single person. So, having an abusive husband in the scene, or somebody she's fallen out of love with, it fills out the runtime, and it is logistical, and it makes sense. So I just really, really wanted to talk about this movie, you guys. I really wish I had somebody to have a conversation with about this, because there are things I'd probably be able to express better or fill this out better for you guys. But if you have a chance, it is currently on Hulu. I just watched it for like the fifth time since I first saw it a couple of years ago. Uh, there are parts that aren't that great, but I mean, it's an imperfect movie. All movies are imperfect. But this is one of the most heartbreaking movies I've watched in a long time, and I mean, I could say that about a lot of movies I watched this year, but they were heartbreaking in really, really different ways. Like, The Lodge is heartbreaking, and it's about mental illness and it's about tragedy, but that's like a really oppressive and scary kind, and The Invisible Man kind of makes you feel like you're losing your mind with the main character, if indeed they are losing their mind. You feel just as gaslit as Elizabeth Moss's character does in that movie. So there are lots of movies where you can understand me saying that, but this is like it could have been helped, it could have been stopped. Nobody was really at fault, you know. Um, I cannot recommend this movie enough. I really, really highly suggest that if you get a chance to watch this movie, go watch it. Leave comments below. Tell me what you thought about it. Find me on my Leading Blind Facebook page. I need to talk about somebody with this movie, because as far as I know, I'm the only one that's seen this movie. I mean, I know other people have seen it, and I've tried to ask other people about it, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I've heard of that one," or "Yeah, I've seen that one," but they never say anything about it. Even when I was on somebody else's live stream, and they're the type of people that they'll let you share links and they'll watch. I sent the 5-minute scene I was talking about earlier to him, and he watched it with the rest of us live, and then it was just kind of like, oh yeah, that was cool, and just moved on. So it's like I need to have a discussion about this movie with somebody. So if you're up for that, leave your comment below. All right, guys, that was my first live movie review. I hope you liked it, and if you have recommendations, God knows I've got enough movies that I could watch and review. So thank you all for coming. Hope you like, share, comment, subscribe, all that normal BS that helps the channel grow, and I hope to see you all next time.